Hi, my name's Richard Smith, and for my sins, I'm the Technical Director for SamSystems, and SamSystems is the parent company for Integral Close Miking, and we're going to run through how you actually install it on your own amp. In this particular instance, the demonstrating unit is a Blackstar HT5, nice and compact, nice and easy to work on, and nice and easy to explain to you how we go about things. First things first, a bit of housekeeping. Make sure before you touch anything that you've unplugged it, disconnected it from the mains, because if you're like me, you're allergic to pain, and we don't want anybody falling over. First thing is that in the packaging there will be a full set of instructions with some small pictures, photographs that explain each of the steps that we're going to take in the process of doing it. The first step is to turn the amplifier and place it on its front, which then gives you access to the back panel, and we'll just run through very quickly unscrewing the back panel. Once those screws are released, we can lift the back panel out of the way to reveal the speaker sitting behind it. In the process of doing that, obviously you'll need to make sure that you're not snagging any cables, and there will be a connection to the speaker. In this case it's a jack plug, and we just undo the jack plug and then lift the assembly out of the way. At the back of this unit there is also a protective grille, and we'll just quickly undo the screws and lift that out of the way as well. What we're now left with is everything removed out of the way. We've got a clear view of the speaker. In this particular instance, the speaker is secured by bolts which are part of the construction of it, and nuts. Now you may find that on your cab that instead of those bolts you may have screws, and what you need to bear in mind is that when you come to put the assembly together, those screws may, not always, but may need to be a little bit longer to accommodate the extra thickness of the unit that you're putting in place. If you feel that they're too short, you may just have to pop down to your hardware store and get some longer versions. Carefully lift out the speaker and just place it to one side. Put it somewhere so you're not going to drop stuff on it or damage it. Now that we've got that out of the way, we then turn to the packaging that the Integral unit comes in, and inside you will see either a 10-inch or a 12-inch speaker version. On the edge of the box it'll tell you which size it is, so if you're in a shop somewhere looking for one, it'll say IM10 for the 10-inch or IM12 for the 12-inch version. In that box you will find the complete unit, and there is a flying lead from it. The flying lead as standard comes with an XLR connection which is in a housing on its own, and when we come to do the installation, talking now about an open back cab, as is this little Blackstar that we're working on, you can then decide where's the most convenient place for you to put that XLR connection, so that when it's all back together and you turn up to a gig, you just want the least obstruction, plug in and go. But also in that box you may think, oh hang on a minute, I've got a closed back cab, so where would that XLR go? And in the box there is an alternative to it, and so we'll come on to that in a minute and explain how that might work for you. So we take the unit out of its box, and you will see immediately when you open the box there's the logo which says Integral Close Miking on it. Now that face has to be facing the grille of the cab, and if you turn it over you'll see there's what I would describe as a pepper pot cover to it with a series of holes, and it's got a teardrop shape to it as well. And sitting behind that is a very special supercardioid pattern microphone capsule. The pepper pot part must be facing towards the speaker. You just place it on the fixing bolts that the speaker would have been mounted on, and then orientate it however you want it. Make sure when you put it in position that the cable is in its slot in the plastic, so that when you put the speaker on you don't pinch it or crease it or tear it, and you then position that in a particular place where you think you're going to put the XLR box for your easy connection once it's finished. Next stage then is to take the speaker back, and you position it on top of the Integral unit that you've currently put in place, and obviously locate it on the fixing bolts. Now in this particular amplifier you'll see that we've got bolts and nuts. You may have an amplifier that doesn't have that arrangement. It might have just screws that go into a female thread that's actually already in the housing. If that's the case, just double check that the ones that you've taken out are now long enough to put back once you've got the Integral unit in place. We've got nuts, you can see that the bolts that are in place already are plenty long enough. They've taken the extra thickness of the Integral that we put in. So the speaker's now back in place. replace those nuts and then just tighten them up. Don't over tighten them, just tighten them up so that the whole thing is nicely secured. We're happy now that we've got the speaker back in position. It's fixed with the nuts, nice and secure. The flying lead that comes off it, hang it over the side of the cab for the minute, just so that you don't get it trapped accidentally anywhere. On this little black star there's a mesh grill, so we need to put that in position first. The next stage then is to position the XLR connection. Just check where you want to put it. In this particular instance, we located it just below the circuit board housing, and if you want to, just put the housing back in position for it. Don't screw it up yet, but just put it back in position just to make sure that that housing isn't going to stop you putting the rest of it together. Once we've decided where the XLR is going to go, just need 2 longish wood screws, and then just secure it in position with those 2 screws. The alternative is, if you don't want to fix it in with screws, you can put some Velcro on the back of it and put it in position with that. But if you're going to have it there forever, I'd put some wood screws in, because, you know, after a year's worth of gigging, the Velcro might just come off. Now we're happy with where the XLR connection's gone. Pretty much the final thing now is to reinstate the circuit board and just pop that back into position and refix it with the screws that we took apart before, and we're done. That's basically everything as far as an open back cab's concerned. So we're now going to do the variation touched on earlier in the video about closed back units. Obviously you've got coming on the flying lead there, you've got a box connection for the XLR. If you look closely at it, you'll see that on the back of it, it's got 4 very small screws which actually hold the 2 halves of that box together. What we need to do is to split that box. So with a very small posi drive type of screwdriver, you can undo those 4 screws. That housing then comes apart, and inside you'll see the actual heart of the XLR connection with the lead coming off the back of it, and off the back of it is also a strain relief. So you carefully take that out of that housing and just put it to one side for a minute. The next step then is that, well, how are you going to fix that? You obviously need a hole for that component to fit in, and what we need to do is to once again decide whether you're going to put a hole in the back panel, or for example you might want to put it in a carry handle. It's entirely up to you where you want to site it, but in this instance we're going to just talk through a simulation of putting it into a back panel. So the first thing to do then is to realize that the components that make up that XLR, we use a 25mm diameter drill bit. Try and do it with one like we're using here, because a lot of the old-fashioned wood drills were just flat blades, you know, to try and make a nice neat job of it, a nice clean hole. If you use one of those old ones, you might end up shredding the wood. We've drilled a hole, and from the inside of what would be the cab, you need to feed that heart of the XLR through the hole. And once it's through the hole, you then look back in the box and you'll see that there was the second housing that we talked about, which is like a flanged arrangement instead of a regular box. Similarly, that splits, and in this instance there's a single screw that holds it all together. You undo the screw, take the 2 halves apart. We've now got the heart of the XLR through the hole, so instead of putting back the original box housing, we now replace it with these 2 halves. And don't forget to make sure that the strain relief is properly in place, because you don't want the wires being tugged accidentally and then having to go through a whole resoldering exercise. Make sure the strain relief's in place, put the housing together, that single screw fixes it, and you've got a complete flanged XLR arrangement. You then feed that back into that hole that you've drilled and fix it with 2 little wood screws top and bottom, and then the last thing to do, of course, is to put the panel back onto the cab and fix it together with the screws that you originally used to take it apart, and you're good to go.